Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox, guys. Wait, before we do anything else, Stephen, dude, you have a certain. I have with me Stephen Carl today. Stephen Carl used to work with Chris Hayes in The Nation. Before I get to him, though, I have to do something because Stephen Carl is he has the grand distinction of being the first up. All right, I gotta do this first. The show has been remonetized. I said it again. The show has been remonetized. I am essentially, my channel is back up to snuff. Apparently super chats, all my other videos and everything else is back up to snuff. They never told me the video. They never told me what happened. I would imagine, hopefully, the back part comes. And yeah, so I want to thank everybody for all of your help during, I guess you can say, this trial of sorts. This was freaking me out type thing. And if I overreacted from the attack on making a living, I apologize. But as a person, I react to my environment. It is what it is. I did what, But I want to say this: the channel is back up, and I want to thank everybody who stuck with me during the time. So thank you guys. And Stephen, grand distinction of being the first person on the soapbox re-testicleize, where they just put them back on.
That's awesome. I'm so happy for you. I am. What they did was just flat out insane.
I saw a thing today from Google, from AdSense, and I said, "Oh my God, has everything come back on?" So thank everybody for bitching and complaining at him. Thank everybody because real talk, if they never turned the show back on, if they never remonetized, I would have never known what it was for. They would have kept the wages. I don't know, man. I'm just saying, this is a scary reality where you don't necessarily control the space where you work. It really is. But Stephen Carlo, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jamal. It's awesome to be here. I'm ready to get into whatever you got going on, whatever we can talk about. In a relatively good mood, and let's talk some shit.
It was a relatively good mood. I'll go with that. I'll take it. You can't be over the moon every day. I'll take it. Relatively good. I like that. So you were talking before the show. I love your background. You're in California, but you have an interesting way by which you got to California. Now, what I mean by that is the moving around that you were telling me about. Please tell me about that, because I want to get into that before we get into the stuff with Chris Hayes. Because believe it or not, what you're about to tell me, I think, is probably the most important thing that has ever happened to you in your life, whether you would agree with me or not. We could argue about that part, but please tell the audience how you ended up in Indiana. I mean, in California, and why it wasn't a culture shock.
Oh, well, I grew up in Anderson, Indiana. I don't know if anybody watched Jimmy Dore's live stream last Saturday, but Chris Hedges called out the town that I grew up in for being an example of a trade policy failure. It was a GM town. It was largely segregated either by class, when it got a little bit too offensive to segregate by race. When I was in high school in the mid-90s, they were still busing people in. My grandparents were missionaries, and they traveled everywhere. So we would go visit them, no matter if they were in the States, or a few times we visited them out of country. I went to Japan when I was 12. I toured a 500-year-old castle. It was incredible.
Oh, wow.
And I still talk to a couple of the people from that host family to this day. I went to Ireland with them when I was young. I have been to every state multiple times. I used to work for Renaissance festivals across the country, so
No
we would be,
way.
yeah.
Way.
So we'd be in a spot for like 2 or 2.5 months,
How
and
the
then
hell did you get a job at a Renaissance festival? And just so people know, tell people what that is, because I don't know if everyone knows what that is. Like I
so
never knew what that was until I ended up in New York,
I never
upstate.
knew what one of them was until I was sneaking into the campground to work for one.
Oh,
I
fair
had
enough.
never been to one. Um, Renaissance festivals are around 30 permanent sites in the United States, and they are supposed to be 16th century recreations.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that is inside of them is handmade by grown-ups in the US, so it costs some money. Um, and There's stage shows, reenactments, comedy. It's turkey legs, a lot of tits. It's I mean, it's hilarious and it's fun. I mean,
It's
people go to them
fun.
all
It's
over the place.
fun. Yeah, it's fun. Those things are
But I
awesome.
had never been to one until I was employed for one. At the time, I was up in like Mount Hood, Oregon area, and it was winter. My hours had just got cut from my job, and my roommate had a winter guest because you when you do Renaissance festivals, you only work like 10 months out of the year,
Mhm.
and you have the winter off because it follows the weather. So this guy was up visiting my roommate, um, and crashing on our couch for the winter. He found out that my hours got cut. He had seen me work. He had heard me talk some shit. We'd been joking around, and he asked me if I liked my job. I said no. He asked me if I had fallen in love recently. I said no. He said, "Get in the fucking truck, and we're gonna go to Arizona, and you can work at a Renaissance festival." So I did.
Nice. Oh man, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Um,
What was the? Keep going. You were talking about your grandparents taking you around with you. Where else did you guys go besides this place?
so those were the only two spots I had visited them internationally, but they had done missionary work in Nairobi, where you are.
Really?
Uh, yeah. Uh, and
Well, you said
it's
Japan also, though, right?
Yeah, I did. I went to Japan. We went to our host family was in Osaka, uh, which is a port city.
Yeah.
I This was 1990 maybe. I was 12. I bought a Game Boy, and they weren't released in the U.S. yet. And then I found out that my Game Boy was in Japanese,
Wow.
and I was a little
Let me
lost
ask
at
you
that
this:
point.
from when? Okay, God, man, that's my. I have a theory, a hypothesis. Let's call it a hypothesis. It's not that strong. Maybe a theory. It depends on who you ask. If people were socialized at a young age to realize that the world had other races and cultures and everything else, they would be more inclusive in the way they think about their world. Like it, when I the first time I traveled to the Middle East, I realized, oh my God, these are real people. Now that sounds stupid when you say it aloud, but it's true. Like it's a conceptual thing versus the guy who drove me in the cab, or the person who was a kid who looked really cute as as they went to school or whatever. Like it becomes a real thing when you've been there and you can see it for yourself. And I think part of the problem with America is that stuff is out there. It's conceptual. They don't get the opportunity at any point in their reality to say, hey, there are real people out there that have real cultures and real societies and real, differences of opinion based on their own cultures and, all this other stuff. We don't do it that way. Um, am I right or wrong? Did that influence you? Of course, the answer is going to be yes, that influenced you. But what degree did that influence you to the standpoint of you becoming, let's say, a writer? Like, and I say that
Well,
to say, like, moving to the standpoint of Chris Hayes and everything else. How did that change or alter or affect your workable point of view of the world?
so there's a quote that I'm probably going to butcher in paraphrasing it, but it's something to the effect of the greatest equalizer to prejudice is travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't I couldn't agree with that sentiment more, even if I get the quote wrong.
Yeah.
You and it's also really hard to kind of contend with the way that I feel about religion now, and having the opportunity to go with my grandparents and hang out with them in different places.
Yeah.
But I love them for it. Part of their thing when we would go and visit them was they'd sit us down and be like, you are going to experience things differently. You are going to be out of your element. There are two things you can do. You can react to it negatively and withdraw and have a horrible time, or you
Deal.
can adapt to the situation, get to know the people around you, and enjoy yourself.
I try
So
to
it was a
tell.
thing that was discussed, is what I'm getting at.
Mhm. I try
Uh,
to my wife. My her mom told me, if anything happened to my daughter, I'm essentially chopping your nuts off and I'm going to put them in a jar.
for sure.
So usually I travel alone, and when I travel alone, I don't have a fear thing associated with me traveling because I have this kind of weird assumption that I'm going to be okay. The first person to get burlap sacked. But now it's like, all right, I got to make sure she doesn't die. I got to make sure she doesn't get burlap sacked. That type of stuff. Um, I try to explain to her that she's out of her element. Like her, it's like putting a puppy in the wilderness. Like his instincts are not quite there because he didn't necessarily have to deal with the bad shit to get him to those places. And this idea of, it's not that people are necessarily bad, but it is a situation that people have needs, and when those needs aren't met, those people are willing to do things to get their needs, and those things aren't necessarily the most savory of things. That has nothing to do with people per se. I just don't want anything happening to you. It's that type of thought. It's this thing of keep you safe. One of
Yeah.
the wild part about it is I was in and this applies to me too, by the way, because there's stuff that still happens where the guy, don't do that, you're gonna die, you're gonna get us killed. I was, what was it? Was it taking pictures? God, I can't remember what it was. It dropped on my mind. It was something that I did where the person I was with was like, don't do that. Don't do that. You're gonna get us, don't do that. Your instincts are attuned to wherever you are, where you're standing. Damn it, I missed where I was going with that because I had a very specific thing that I was going to say, and now I don't have it. It's not witty anymore. All right, but nevertheless, the travel thing is extremely important. Like I could not emphasize that enough. And it's even that travel. If I'm being honest, even if the person can travel, having kids understand other cultures and those other cultures are real is God vitally important. Like
I agree.
Cannot get it across enough. I can't get it across enough because the only way that you can prosper a war is if those other people somehow think they're separate and distinct from who you are. And the fact is, they're not. I'm telling you, they're not. I look around, even here, and the same issues that they would deal with here, we deal with there. They're slightly different, but they're the same. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I do. I try to impart that onto my own kids as well. And
but
they're like, we've traveled about, my oldest son has been to 23 states. Yeah, it's vital.
let me ask you this. All right, so let's get to Chris Hayes. So how did you end up working for Chris Hayes at The Nation?
So I used to mess about on the Daily Kos back in the day, and I became a frequently recommended listed writer, and they were pitching the fact that the Nation wanted a blog team for the 2008 election. So a handful of us from that were, I guess, kind of the cool kids at the Daily Kos, which is like being the world's tallest midget. Got a little preferential treatment, and then we got on board that way. So
So they were looking for writers. So for all intents and purposes, this was one of those things where you were good enough and lucky enough to essentially get in this gig.
Yeah, and I had a portfolio to go with it. You
Yeah.
know, there was an existing body of work
Well, that's why I
that.
said good enough. Like they looked at your work and they were like, this guy's good, and you were in the right place at the right time. Because I would imagine there were, other good writers. I mean, I guess I'm saying that this was an amazing opportunity to work with one of these outfits.
Oh, absolutely. And you got to remember though, 10 years ago, people thought blogs were ridiculous.
Yeah.
I didn't really see a future in it. It wasn't a medium per se yet. You know, we'd only had Facebook for a couple of years, I think, at that point, or maybe a year. Um, so it was a newer medium. So a lot of people that considered themselves established writers wouldn't touch it.
Yeah. They were better.
So
We're
because
better
of
than
that,
this.
you know, because of that vacuum, people who were not established were able to jump in.
So let me ask you this: Seymour Hersh, the reporter for My Lai Massacre, he exposed the My Lai Massacre.
Yeah,
and he's been doing the touring circuit where he's been talking about his book, The Reporter. I recommend that book to everyone who wants to read. Seymour Hersh is a newsman's newsman. We were talking about this earlier. Like the guy exudes newsman. You look at him and be like, I think that guy's a newsman. That kid, as a baby, he looked like a newsman. And that book, one of the things he talks about is censorship. That, one of the aspects of the job is, especially when he first started doing it, was this kind of, okay, I don't want to do the story. For whatever reason, this is going to step on somebody's toes. This is somewhat impolite. It's this thing of the reporter themselves censoring certain information that may actually be vital to the society itself. Did you see that at The Nation with Chris Hayes?
The Nation fostered a culture of self-censorship. It was immediately understood the first time that you wrote something that wasn't within the parameters of what they felt that they were willing to print, that your whole day's work or your whole week's work just got axed and didn't appear anywhere. They did not publish everybody that wrote. There quickly became a theme that anybody like me who was writing about Dennis Kucinich was going to be ignored. We still got paid.
Well, so wait, so they paid you, they just didn't allow your writing to go up?
Yeah.
Are you serious? They just paid you to do what?
I mean, it wasn't much. They weren't handing out, $500, $600, $700 checks. I think we got paid like $25 for each post we wrote.
Oh, I see.
But when you submitted a post, that $25 was credited to your account.
What would be something that they would
discretion of the editor, who at the time, Chris Hayes, was the politics editor of The Nation. That's how he started going on Rachel Maddow's show.
What would be the stories that they would allow versus the stories that they wouldn't allow? Like, is there like a big story that it was like, oh my God, how could you not cover that story?
Well, it's not so much that really, as they were only letting certain candidates be discussed. They had already, like, either the message had come down or they were intentionally working with one or two candidates to push their narrative, that it just became clear that nobody was going to talk about Dennis Kucinich. If you wrote about John Edwards, you had to include a haircut joke.
Seriously?
I mean, I'm exaggerating to clarify.
Oh, but essentially it has to be somewhat cheesy. It couldn't be like a serious.
Well, you could be dead serious if it was about Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. And you could write a serious article about Edwards, but you had to throw in a jab or two, or else it seemed like it wasn't getting printed.
Now, why do you think that's the case?
Because they had a narrative that they were trying to
tarnish the water.
there was a narrative that they were trying to push, and it was clear from the get-go that it was for the corporate candidates. Obama had not overtly conceded that he was a corporate candidate back in like January of 2008. That became more apparent towards Super Tuesday, that he was also going to have the back of the same companies that had Hillary Clinton's back. And it was, he was not necessarily the hope and change guy that he was selling himself to be.
I see.
But unless you were there, unless you were covering it, or unless you were in, you know, a writers meeting in a hotel room, and you were able to discuss more of the meat of the speeches and look into who was making the donations, that if you didn't know that, if you weren't there, it wasn't clear to you. You were hearing the rhetoric and going, that is exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah. Wow. The Nation is a liberal magazine. That's fair to say, right? I mean, it's one of those things.
Absolutely.
And I guess what I'm asking you is, did anybody, well, let me ask you two ways. Were you in coordination with any other writers at that point? You were doing a blog, and so this blog kind of, you know, it may have isolated you from the standpoint of anybody else, but was there an ability for multiple people to interact? And did you have the opportunity to interact with Chris Hayes, where you would come away with the impression of, yeah, this is not a positive impression that I'm getting?
Yeah, there were a couple of times right before we all got started, and right before we went out our various ways in January to cover different campaigns, that we had a staff meeting in DC. And
okay, so you guys did meet up at times.
Yeah, there were two that I was at before they invited me to become successful elsewhere. And we'll get to why.
That's funny. That's funny. Because, you know, it's like God, I love that, because not that I love that you're funny. I love the way it was put, because for the first second or two in my head, it was before they invited me to be successful. And then the last word elsewhere. It was like, oh yeah, they fired him. So what was the thing that got you fired? Like, what do you think you got fired? Because you say that, I suspect it comes across as if you're saying, look, these meetings rubbed me the wrong way, or they rubbed me in a way that I got across that I was rubbed in the wrong way. And they were like, okay, this is not going to work out.
Some of it is probably I'm not going to say youthful idealism, because I was fairly cynical at that point, but I wanted to believe that the organization that I was going into was the organization that I thought they were, that they were a little bit more radical than other outlets, that they would talk about things that people weren't talking about, because they did. You know, the Nation still does some good work, but by and large, they're a neoliberal corporate outlet.
That's what I'm asking. I guess I'm asking, like, what story? Like, what if it's censorship? Let's assume for the moment that's there's censorship. What has been censored as opposed to shown? Like, what is the thing that you were like, okay, this should have been done a particular way? I know you're saying Dennis Kucinich, but
yeah, that's the jumping off point. But you were not allowed to. I'm going to say you were not allowed to. You were not printed if you had a critique from the left of Obama or Hillary.
Okay.
And when you could critique one or the other from the left, there had to be a juxtaposition of a position that the other person had that was more to the left. You know, had to be an equal playing field. And writing from not even the far left, still in a capitalist realm, but that left in spectrum was it was not exactly openly discouraged, but it was openly discouraged.
It was like, it was understood that this wasn't going to fly.
Yeah. So at that point in my life, I had basically ran flat out of fucks regarding that particular position.
Yeah.
I was naive enough to think that I could burn a bridge with the nation and go elsewhere with my writing.
And that
So I
wasn't the
did.
case.
That was not the case. Um, so I did, and I wrote an article called Barack Obama, Reagan with a Tan.
Oh wow. Oh wow. There's no way they're going to print that. There's no way they're going to print
No,
that.
but
There's no way.
I highlighted each and every blatant corporate donation he had.
No, no,
I
no. Look.
I highlighted Bill
I don't even
Maher's
know what's in
thousand
that.
or $1,000,000. Go ahead.
I don't
Sorry.
even know what's in that article, and I agree with you. I'm just saying there is no way any liberal media outlet is going to print that article just on the title alone. They're going to be like, they're
I
going to.
was pulling text from speeches where he was talking about war in a way that was very clearly to the right of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan mentioned nuclear disarmament a lot in his speeches. Now, I mean, it was bullshit, but he talked about it.
Mm.
Uh, Obama, no. I mean, he said something about scaling back and whatnot, but at no point was disarmament even mentioned.
That's that on the table.
And so I started realizing that what we were going to get out of Barack Obama was someone who governed from the center right and hit every progressive high note in his rhetoric.
Yeah.
And that the decisions that he made that were going to be or appear to be progressive were in no way, shape, or form going to negatively impact the bottom line of the people who donated to his campaign.
Yes, that is very true, and that's how it turned out. I mean, that's literally how what turned out. Wow.
So when I mentioned that, that was the last straw, and this was probably I was right before the California primary.
Oh, you wrote that before the California primary, so you became aware of this before he even got elected.
Yeah, and I was pilloried for it. And I was roundly dismissed as a crackpot, or a commie. I was a Putin puppet before it was cool.
Right, I know, right? You had the T-shirt before people were wearing the T-shirt.
But yeah, and it snowballed into me shelving writing for a while. I had a family, and came out. I was in Boulder Creek here at the time, and just kind of focusing on that. But I had no idea the residual effect that calling out corporate neoliberalism in 2008 was going to have. Because I didn't necessarily stop writing. I just got to a point where I stopped submitting things because my name would pop up and they'd be like, "Oh, that fucking guy."
So you think so? So what do you think happened? You think they passed your name around, or you think it was just kind of a liberal community somewhere? I give you an example. Tom Hartman. Tom Hartman, was Bernie Sanders used to come on Tom Hartman's show, like every week or something to that effect.
Oh yeah.
And somewhere along the way, when they were running, it was very clear that Tom Hartman was having a hard time with the election because he had competing interests. There was clearly an interest on one side, meaning the Hillary camp, to get him to behave in a different way. Like their marching orders were in. He knew what he was supposed to say from the standpoint of a script. And having this kind of thing with Sanders kind of screwed that up. Like it was weird in the sense, like it was almost as if all of them had their orders. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Is it something like that where you think that people were like, okay, we've seen this guy a few times write this stuff. He's off our radar. Like it's just anything he writes is a no, like a blacklist.
It certainly felt that way, regardless of whether or not there were, emails sent out from the nation's political editor or other contributing writers. Whether that happened or not, it certainly appeared that way. It felt that way because I wasn't even getting traction on HuffPo, and they let anybody submit an article to HuffPo. And what I was saying wasn't anything that was outlandish. It was just the truth that they didn't want to hear or weren't comfortable printing because it was going to ruffle wrong feathers, I suppose.
Well, it was
They
going to
didn't
hurt
want to
their
hear
king.
that. It was
Well,
2008, man. You know, Barack Obama was supposed to be some sort of new
FDR.
kind of Democrat that was going to help bring us into the 21st century. And he talked about single payer. He had a progressive coalition that he immediately dropped as soon as he got to DC.
Well, he had to grow up.
There was a
He had to
whole.
grow up. At that point, it was like I had to grow up and sell out.
Well, it's like Bill Hicks used to say, they take you into a room and show you the Zapruder film from a different angle. And then say, do you have any questions? Well, just what my agenda is.
The second, I remember you were hip to this a long time before many others. Glenn Ford was writing articles apparently about this. I couldn't imagine. Jesse Jackson was out crying when Obama was elected. Did you see that? He was like on the margins, weeping, like his eyes just bawling. Yeah. Now, to people who are in this moment, you're coming and spitting in their Kool-Aid. You're essentially saying, look, this guy who you think is this kind of black messiah is not, nothing like that. If anything, he's Ronald Reagan. And you may get some stuff, but you're gonna, it's not gonna be hope and change in the way that you think it's hope and change. I gotta be honest, I was not politically astute. And I thought, I'm somebody who voted for Nader. And even before I was politically astute, I voted for Nader. I knew enough to say, this guy seems genuine. The other, the other assholes, not so much. And so when I saw Obama, I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. This guy's amazing. And he gets in office and it's like, all right, what's going to happen? And you're like with popcorn and it's so slow and drawn out. And then you realize somewhere along the way, oh, not so much. Not so much. Like there was a point in healthcare where the people were talking about, Obama was talking about even dropping it. I mean, let alone it's supposed to have, I remember during the debates where Hillary Clinton brought out, she says, well, I'm going to have the mandate, like a mandatory thing, percentages by their healthcare. And Obama said, I'm not going to do that. Now, immediately between these two things, if it's, I'm going to force you to do this versus I'm not going to force you to do this, well, of course, I don't want you to force me to do anything. And he gets in office and immediately he's doing the exact same thing that Hillary Clinton said. And nobody made an issue about this. And I'm like, he flat out lied. That's a lie. That's an outright categorical lie. That's a lie.
Speaking ill of Barack Obama was a cardinal sin for at least 7 years.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
And it wasn't until like late 2015 when the real numbers started coming out about how many bombs we were dropping a day, like becoming publicly aware, the non-response about the Dakota Access Pipeline, the fact that he let SWAT, just fully armed police crack heads at Occupy. That he hit all of the right-wing authoritarian high notes over and over and over again. But there was this effect to where all of the criticism was pushed to the side or dismissed. And I'm a tattooed white dude. It was easy for people to dismiss my criticism of Obama, regardless of what my personal experience is. Where I grew up in my hometown, I have more friends that look like you than look like me. Because that's just how it fucking works out.
The problem is a little bit more complicated than that, I would argue.
Well, yeah, it is, but not to oversimplify.
No, that's not what I mean. Let me explain what I mean. What I was talking to another gentleman at one of the conferences, and he says, I don't think African Americans were ready for a black president. Now, what he meant by that was, it's it's, you hug him because he's yours. Like, full stop. You hug him because he's yours. And not just hug him because he's yours, you hug him tighter because you realize that the attacks on him was so unfair. Like this is not like a left criticism of Obama. Some of the right wing used to like socialists, communists. It's like something else is hanging in their throat that they just want to say. They can't get it out. They just use these other words for it. And the pictures of him like an ape and all this other stuff. You hug him because he's yours, and you realize that the attacks on him are blatantly unfair. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not going to exploit that. That doesn't mean he's not going to exploit that at all. So it's, yeah, you hug him because he's yours, but yeah, I'm going to pass this tax cut. I'm going to, or I'm going to enshrine Bush's tax cuts in the law. And any criticism of that gets pushed to the side. You hug him because he's yours. It's a complication that's not as explicit with a white president, because whites are going to attack white presidents in this way. And you're not going to have blacks hugging a white president in this very particular way, because they're not going to be attacking him in this way. It's a weird racial dynamic that's created with putting him in office, that to some degree you either exploit as a politician, of course you're supposed to exploit it. But I don't know. It's like, what do your society do? Do you criticize them in that office and essentially, almost to some degree, go into the nonsense that the right wing was saying? So it's like the right wing is saying nonsense, and do you add on other attacks on them, because it feels like at that point,
by the way, up the amount of drone strikes that George Bush was doing. Yeah,
right.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think that the only thing you can hope for is that when you're making these criticisms, that they're rooted in truth.
Yes.
And that when you have that, regardless of the attacks that are coming your way for speaking that truth, it's the only thing that really can sustain you, knowing that what you're saying is correct and what needs to be said, regardless of whose feelings get hurt along the way. And if the feelings that get hurt along the way are the fucking owners of this country, I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, and especially if it's like in UK, where everything is racist, like Jeremy Corbyn, everything is anti-Semitic. It's like you're saying, well, you guys created an apartheid state where you're literally saying that it's a Jewish state, and you have other people that live there. By definition, that's somewhat racist. And it's like, that's true. All of that is true. And they would say, and Jeremy Corbyn would make a point, and they're like, that's anti-Semitic. He attacked a banker, and he said it was anti-Semitic.
I saw that.
It's nonsense. Margaret Hodge is a howling banshee. That has nothing to do with her being Jewish. That has everything to do with her being a howling banshee. That's a big difference in those things. Now, her being politically minded attacked Jeremy Corbyn, calling him a fucking anti-Semite. She, at no point, can make up anything credible to show that Jeremy Corbyn had ever said anything that was anti-Semitic. Like, in reality, not the bullshit stuff that they're showing. Right. And they're using this purely as an attack because they know he supports Palestinian rights. It's like the very act of being pro-Palestinian is racist, which is nonsense. It's complete nonsense. I guess that's what I'm saying.
It's a marketable point.
Yeah, I mean, it's true.
That's what it comes down to. It's a marketable point.
Yeah, yeah. It's and not to mention it's kind of repugnant. Like, who the fuck wants to be racist? You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, you're anti-Semitic. Like, it's gross. It's just utterly gross. So yeah, I can imagine if you're going to make an argument about Obama, somebody as a Democrat, even if you're right, may say that. This is what I mean when I said there's a certain complexity to having Obama in office. Granted, that complexity would be with any woman, with any multinational group, any of that stuff. And it's not because of the person, it's mostly because of the society itself and the way they relate to that person. But yeah, there's a complexity there. Yeah, they use that stuff sometimes. Sometimes it's true, like sometimes this stuff is used for people's base. And again, this is what I mean when I say there's complexity, where they gin up racial resentment in the base using that stuff. But that's not the same thing as the left attacking Obama. Like the left, in this sense, is attacking Obama for stuff that he did, not necessarily because of who he is. It's a difference.
Well, at least in my case, and a lot of other people came around to the same conclusion. We were upset because he put the anti-war sentiment to sleep.
Yeah.
We we were marching in 2004 and 5 and 6 and 7, and once the inauguration happened,
That was it.
you really could not criticize the military. It was it, I've never seen a charming act put on just mass numbers of people like that. Like the ability to criticize war went away with Barack Obama, or it was outright dismissed.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. You can when it comes to a race factor or a gender factor, you can exploit it or you can become victim to it. And people in power are always going to choose to exploit it. I don't necessarily think that had anything to do with the anti-war movement going away.
No, no,
I
no,
think
no.
a lot of
just
that
because it
was a
was those
concerted effort by the media to suppress any and all information about what we were up to militarily.
Well, it made it was Obama, so it made it look like it's like he's Obama, he's a Democrat, he's anti-war. It's like Democrats are weak on war. Like that's the thought. At least that's what I think. I think it's people looked at it as he was against the war. He's a Democrat, and he'll be less hawkish than many of the others.
Well, he ran on it.
He,
They gave him a goddamn Nobel Peace Prize, and he turned around and escalated our military to almost incomprehensible levels, and did it with nobody going.
Like, wait a minute. Yeah. Nobody flipped out about the number of bombs being dropped. Steven, dude, I really appreciate this. Is there anything you want to let the audience know before we end?
Yeah, absolutely. I am launching a podcast called Slow News Day in early October. I'm looking forward to having Jamarl on as my first guest to talk about more social media censorship. We also have Tim Canova booked, Steve Grumbine from Real Progressives, and we're trying to work something out with Lee Camp,
Nice.
who's coming to Santa Cruz in October. So we're trying to get him up to the studio where we're going to record. I've been talking to him on and off this morning. So I'm really stoked about that. I'm also the co-founder of the Progressive Independent Party, which is involved both directly and indirectly with a number of other political parties in order to try and get some unification on the left.
Yes.
I just interviewed Tim Canova on behalf of them the other night. That was fun as fuck. I found out some shit about Tim Canova that just blew my mind in terms of how well versed he is on every conceivable topic. I asked him a question about general strikes. He's like, "Oh, I'm the only politician that's ever advocated against repealing the Taft-Hadley Act." Blah blah, and like it. I mean, the guy's just a depth of knowledge, and I'm seriously interested in trying to form some sort of content creators union.
Well, he's a law professor.
Somewhere along the way.
He's a law professor, right?
Yeah, he's a constitutional law professor.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I mean. Like, he better know that stuff. He's a law professor. Yeah, he's extraordinarily bright. And talking about a union, that would be the guy to know. No.
Yeah. Wow. Other than that, man, just thank you. I had a great time.
No, man, I appreciate this. I'm fascinated by the censorship stuff because like we were talking about before, this idea of this stuff like Greg Palast, how Greg Palast is like, our elections are fraudulent, and nobody. Media says, well, I mean, the guy says they're fraudulent, but who knows? It's like, well, you have an entire media apparatus. Do you want to verify what he's saying? Because if what he's saying is true, that's a big fucking deal. And can you spend, 2 reporters to go and actually check the shit out? Do you really need? I'm just saying,
So, here's
there's a
the thing,
certain.
though. If you notice how the election fraud or voter fraud trajectory goes, there's media all over what you can't prove.
Yeah.
And there's a concerted effort for them to cover what you can't prove. Even when guys like Greg Palast are standing there showing them the proof that things like interstate crosscheck exist. It's not, it stops being lazy and starts being complicit.
Yes. And again, I keep asking, are they lying or are they corrupt? I don't know which. I would wager that in Soviet Union, the people in the Soviet Union, some of them might have believed that the stuff that was coming out in the newspaper was real. And these having people to scrub certain stories or everything, you start to question how significant is the scrubbing of information to the public itself. You know what I mean? Like you said, at some point you stop being complicit. The moment that you hear that the numbers are fudgy, it's how difficult is it to investigate that? And the idea of not being able to verify a voting thing, how difficult it is to investigate that. At some point, it becomes, like you said, complicit. It's not them just lying.
And there's a myriad of things they could have investigated. It wasn't just who got kicked off the rolls from crosschecks. There was a voter purge in New York. There was ballot irregularities in something like 24 states. There were polling places shut down. I mean, there's so many different angles you could come at it from, and they're coming at it from 3 million Mexicans voted illegally. And now that's the debate, because you pigeonholed the entire conversation about election fraud into imaginary Mexicans rigged the election, and that's intentional.
I wonder, is it one of those things where they are concerned with, what's the word I'm looking for? They're concerned with people not believing in the integrity of the process. Like in Kenya, the guy says, I wish we had a Mugabe. And what he meant by that was sitting on the throne, for 30 years, like a president for 30 years. So they don't have to deal with elections, because the elections are a mess. It's like nobody concedes. So you have one side that wins, the other side says the other side cheated. Now, thing is, the other side did cheat in the last election. They tortured a guy. There was an IT person who had the information that allowed them to access the program. Tortured him, killed him, took the information, changed the vote total. The entire public saw that the vote total was changed and rioted over this. Like literally almost was going to civil war over this. Elections here are interesting things. They're interesting things, to say the least. So it could be just, we don't want to have anything to challenge the integrity of the process, because if you do, oh my God, what happens if you find that the shit is rigged?
Well, the natural recourse should be riot. You should riot over that. You're right.
No, I agree with you.
If you remove the curtain.
I agree with you, but I agree with you. The people who are in established order, who are doing extraordinarily well with the system the way it is, don't agree with you. They like the system the way it is. They don't want to necessarily lose their ends. They can't predict what happens if if people start rioting and pulling shit apart. So from their standpoint, they do what they have to do to maintain the system the way it is. So if that means that the media needs to say, there's nothing to see here, folks, move on. There's nothing to see here, folks, move on.
Yeah, and they'll still get their checks, and they'll still be able to send all of their kids to private school, and they'll be able to exist in a bubble where the reality that the rest of us live in, where we're struggling, where we're working a couple of jobs, where, it's because it doesn't directly affect them.
Yeah,
but telling the truth on the air directly affects their bottom line and their livelihood.
Yeah, it does.
So in the meantime, we should grow our own food.
Honestly, that's why we're here. Yeah. It's what I tend to think things. I tend to think things replicate themselves. Like a person is a smaller version of society, or society is a larger version of a person. And you can see this in the way broken things behave. Like, so you had lefties who felt that they were cheated, get pissed off, and that pissed offness is not going anywhere. anytime soon, and that's going to fester into something else. The Russia stuff that was propagated on a dumbed down public accepts it, and that will fester into something else. It doesn't just evaporate. When people realize that they hated their media because they didn't believe the media was real, just like if you had a blockage in your arm or blockage in your leg, your body starts creating these capillaries to kind of go around it. We're the capillaries. We're the around it, because the media itself was so atrocious from the standpoint of the public, and the public realized something was wrong. That's us. That's why we're here. So
I agree, and I'm happy that your voice is one of the voices that people are tuning into. You have a wholly unique perspective on things that I really appreciate, and I try to share your shit as often as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. The funny part is I don't know what my perspective is unique. My argument is if you're a man sitting on the moon looking at the world, what does it look like? That's and I know that sounds a weird way, but that perspective means that you don't have one perspective. Like, that perspective means that there are multiple perspectives, and you acknowledge that there are multiple perspectives. Like that, this guy has a point because of the way this guy, think, and this guy maybe has a point or doesn't have a point at all, or is making shit up. You know what I mean? It's just, it's one of those things. I had to learn is don't hold on to stuff, like you like having ideas and stuff like that, and being willing to let those ideas go. That's not easy, especially doing this, because you have to kind of crystallize yourself, because everybody has competing ideas on what the world is, and they try to push their narratives. You find that ultimately these things are just competing narratives. The reality of it is much harder to come by. And oftentimes you find that this stuff boils down to what are the incentives in the system itself. And from that point on, that's the way I try to look at it. I'm not always perfect on that. I fuck up on that sometimes, but that's the way I look at it, man. I don't know why that's unique. Some people.
I'll tell you why it's unique. Because you approach the story with that process in mind, and you're like taking several steps along the way while absorbing the information, and half the time going through it with your listeners, and there's an immediate connection made between you and your audience, and then you take us with you through that process. So what you're doing is you're not necessarily like doing a stand-up bit, or you're not reading off the news. Your interactions are fluid with your crowd most of the time. And so it allows you to approach, as you were saying, from multiple perspectives, because you're literally doing that in real time.
Yeah, right. Right. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's odd, man. It's an odd thing. I haven't when I started this channel, I literally just started this channel just because I was pissed off, and I at a certain point your wife gets sick of you. At a certain point your family gets sick of you, and you're like, I'm just gonna bitch. I have so much bitching in me that the bitching in me is just overflowing, and I gotta put it somewhere. So fine, I just put it here. And then one day it's like, you know what? I think I'm gonna get a desk. Just like these weird leaps of changing, like tweaks here and tweaks there. Dude, I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Hey, thank you very much, man.
Let me know when you want me on your show, when you guys start.
Yeah. So sometime first week of October.
No, I don't. I am not, dude. I'm gonna
do that. I'm gonna do that.
Evo. This is my wife joined me to help with the Patreon and stuff like that. I suck at this part. So, but no, I'm saying yes. I'm going to be on your show, but I need to have something where I can. Because what I'm going to end up doing is, what day am I supposed to be on this show? And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to type in to see your name and everything else. If it's left to my memory, I'm going to be like, what day was that? I think that was a Friday.
Right.
Like, what the fuck? Where are you? So, what do you want me? I'll be there. I promise.
All right, brother.
Thanks, man.
Well,
Have a good one.
thank you.
All right, guys. I'm going to end this here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I thought this was going to be interesting because he was talking about behind the scenes with censorship and crusades. So I thought that was going to be pretty damn cool. I will end this one here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support the Patreon. Thanks all. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be back in a few. I'm going to have patron appreciation probably tomorrow. Stephanie Cheto has given me a really complicated one. Fermi paradox. That's not, not the simplest thing in the world to think of. But she gave it like, there's a time difference. So for me, it was like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And for her, I think it was in the morning. But she was like, hey, Julian Assange talked about the Fermi paradox. Would you like to do that too? It was like, yes, that's interesting. I can't do that in an hour. I can't do that in an hour. So tomorrow, either tomorrow or Sunday, we're going to have the patron appreciation show. And I think I'm supposed to have a Q&A, a question and answer. I don't think anybody submitted any questions, so I don't know if we're going to have Q&A. So we end up with Stephanie's thing. I have several things I need to discharge before I can go to other things from stuff that I've experienced and taken in here. I'm probably going to just do that live and put it on my Patreon page as a treat for patrons. I don't know if it's a treat at all, if I'm being honest, because they're going to be like, what the hell is this? Fucking can you? But my thinking is, this is just my page, man. I didn't start this with the intention of it only being news. I do Star Trek stuff. I do all sorts of weird shit on my page. And the Kenya stuff just happens to be it. And there will be Egyptian stuff, and there will be German stuff, and British stuff. And, it just so happened this is where I am right now. Morocco, Qatar is going to be up. Those, I don't have those yet. Providing I don't die, and providing I don't drop dead or hit my head on something or something else, or my funding source drops out, like meaning just how I do the channel and everything else. This is supposed to go ticking along for months. This is the first week of what's supposed to be 6 to 8 months. Is what it is. We make do. So far, Kenya has been great. Let me. I have. Yeah. I mean, if you see me writing down a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of stuff that like even stuff going to the thing of like an African American versus a Kenyan, like this idea of being in this country as an African American and like welcome home, and it's like, well, my home is Richmond, Virginia, but I appreciate you telling me welcome home. But that said, there's yeah, I'm not gonna go to that. I'll do it on a separate video because this is going long. There's a profoundness though, that I have a hard time articulating, that I can't put into words. Richard Pryor, when he came here, Richard Pryor, he's used the N-word all the time. And Richard Pryor comes back and he says, I noticed there were no niggers here. And he has this thing, he says he stopped saying the word. Now, I don't know if Richard Pryor stopped saying the word. I have a hard time believing Richard Pryor did. But I get where he's coming from. I get where he's coming from. It's a weird experience, man, being an African American. Like all of the billboards look like you. All of the mascots, insignias look like you. All of the politicians look like you. The woman who's arguing in the PM as an MP looks like your aunt. You know what I mean? Or the guy who's the head of the labor thing, or not the labor of the head of the who's in charge of Speaker of the House. Looks like a family member of yours, or look like somebody you see in your church or your old church. It's an interesting experience, to say the least. The mannerisms, like you recognize the mannerisms from people in your family, even though you've never met these people in your life. Like you are distinctly different based on culture. By the same token, the aspects of you um, that originate from here, you are familiar to you in certain ways, that you see in the way certain mannerisms, certain maybe even the way they express themselves. Like looking at a politician here, the it looks like a British PMQs. Like if you looked at their stuff, their political system, it looks like PMQs. But the people who are arguing look like African Americans arguing in Congress. Like one of the women is like, that looks like Maxine Waters. Like, God damn it, that looks like Maxine Waters. Even the way she argues looks like Maxine Waters. I guarantee you, Maxine Waters has never met that woman in her life. There are aspects of us that are here, but there are cultural aspects of us that are clearly from where we are back home. It is an odd thing where you see familiarity in a country that you've never been to. And honestly, if I'm being honest, a little bit racist before I got here. Um, it's an interesting experience. It really is. It's a wild experience. Oh fuck, terrorism. That's the other thing. Security and terrorism. All right, I'm gonna end this here. Dude, thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate you coming on to the show, man. And
Oh,
if
thank you,
again,
man.
like I said, send me the email and we will get together.
Absolutely. Congratulations on being remonetized.
I know, right? I'm out of the clink. They've let me out of the jail. So great. So finally, I don't know what it was for. I have no idea why they hit me. But it is what it is. Make it work. All right, dude. All right, guys.
All right, man.
Y'all have a good night. And we are